said my time and daddy, he don't treat me right. He just come round when he wants, and he leaves just when he likes.
Hey, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Tell You What, the podcast. We talk with young songwriters about the craft of songwriting, live music performance, and the power of music. Our guest this week is Carson McHone, a tremendously talented young artist out of Austin, Texas. Austin's one of my favorite places in the world. I try to get down there whenever I can, particularly when the wind is blowing cold up here in the vast Midwestern hinterlands. There are a lot of towns with great music scenes, but in Austin, music is part of the very fabric of the city. You can just feel it as you walk around and interact with the great people there. Carson is a native of Austin. I've heard her refer to herself as a unicorn, as there are many musicians who call Austin home, but not many who were born and bred there as well. She spent a portion of her youth in some of Austin's finest dive bars and honky-tonks, where she had the opportunity to perform regularly and hone her chops while still a teenager. Carson's music is a reflection of her personality. It is honest, intelligent, and witty, and those traits come through in our discussion as well. She has a wonderful new album out, Carousel. Carousel was produced by Mike McCarthy in Nashville, Tennessee. Mike has produced some of my favorite albums ever by the band Spoon, as well as records by Patty Griffin and Leanne Womack. Carson's songs are to a certain degree a product of her upbringing in Texas, with unmistakable traditional country influences. But she brings her modern and pointed spin to those traditions, and the results are quite compelling. I highly recommend you give Carousel some listens. So let's get to it. Here's my discussion with Carson McHone.
You can ride your pony, drive your truck, but if you don't feel right, you'll be shit out of luck. So you can ride your pony, or drive your truck.
All right, Carson,
Yes.
Welcome to Tell You What, the podcast. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm in Tell You What Studios in the Tell You What Towers in Wilmette, Illinois. You are in Austin, is that correct?
I'm actually just a little bit outside of Austin. I'm in Buda, Texas.
All right. Well, that brings me to my first question about your background. You were raised in Austin, am I right?
That's right.
Okay, so kind of hard to escape music influence in Austin. So can you talk a little bit about the kind of music you were exposed to growing up and what kind of influences were around your house and elsewhere?
Sure. So neither of my folks are musicians, but all their friends are. And they were in the beer business for a long time. So, they found themselves at all the local clubs. My dad was a distributor, and from a young age, I was, being carried around to, little bars like the Dog and Duck Pub or places like Threadgill's, Cactus Cafe,
Yep.
Spots like that. And then going to see live music with them. And, Austin is a pretty family-friendly city, too.
Right. So they would take you to shows when you were little.
Yeah, and luckily, we had pretty similar tastes in music. My dad was a huge bluegrass fan. My mom loved songwriters, and so, I got to go see Dr. Ralph Stanley at the Texas Union Ballroom when I was like 12. It was just incredible. And a guy named Slade Cleaves opened, who's a local here. And, so that turned us on to Slade, and, we've since bought all of his records. And so kind of folks like that, like local legends, but then also Austin being like sort of this music city, people will pass through here on their tours.
Right.
And so we would get a lot of outside touring bands as well. So, there's music every night of the week here, and I was lucky to be surrounded by that. Now when I go on the road, and we'll play in small towns. It's like an event. It's like, oh, there's music happening tonight.
Right.
And so that's been really eye-opening. And I realize how lucky I am to have grown up in a music city. I mean, there are definitely challenges that come along with that because it's so saturated with live music.
Right.
But I feel really, really lucky to have grown up in this city.
So you said your mother was interested in songwriters. So would that be like folk style, country, across the board?
I mean, kind of across the board. Leonard Cohen was, Dylan, Patty Griffin, Natalie Merchant, just all across the board. And then, of course, I'm a Texan, so folks like Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute. How about when did you start playing music or singing or any of that?
Yeah, well, I grew up, like I said, neither of my folks were really musical. My dad can sing, but they didn't play instruments, and so from a young age, they had me taking music lessons. I took violin lessons, and I did that for years.
Stuck with the violin for years.
Yeah, and I didn't ever really get into it. It was more of oh, it's this thing that I have to do, like that my parents are having me do, and
Homework.
It's kind of that's how I sort of approached it until I met this woman, Darcy, who's sort of a local legend here in Austin. She's played with numerous bands and has her own career, and she plays guitar and fiddle and all kinds of stuff, but she really introduced me to fiddle playing, and and so then when I met Darcy DeVille, she had me, she was like, well, bring in that Dixie Chicks record and let me teach you how to play this line, or here's this old Irish fiddle tune, let's learn that. And that was the stuff that I was into. And so,
and how old were you at this point?
I think I was about 14.
Okay.
Maybe 13 or 14. And that's when I started taking music a little bit more seriously, besides just singing along in the car. I mean, I obviously had my own interests already. I was following this music or that music, but I never thought it was something that I would really do.
Right.
Until about that age when I started working with Darcy, and I also I was gifted a mandolin by my uncle, and that was the first instrument that I learned how to strum and make chords with, and that's when I started singing.
Okay.
So about 15, I started doing a little bit more with mandolin, and then when I was 16, I'd say that's when I started playing out in bars.
So when did songwriting start for you?
I think it began long before it actually came to being for me. I think it was a thing in the back of my head. I always was writing, even from a young age, whether it was little poems or prose things. And when I had the chance, I would take classes in school that, I took a poetry class or a creative writing class when I was in middle school. And
right.
I was always, English was the only thing I ever did well in school. I was a big reader. My mom's a writer and an avid reader. And so, the house, we were always trying to find room for more bookshelves because the books never stopped coming. And so when I got a guitar, and I started learning how to play chords and stuff, that's when the writing and the playing started coming together, and I started writing songs, which, started out at first just as sort of collections of things I'd been writing, and then I would sort of just put them to music. As I began to learn more about the instrument, now it just kind of depends on how things come to me, how songs hit me, but usually it's a little bit more hand in hand these days. But when I first started writing, it was definitely okay, I have these poems and I want to try to put them into song. Or
okay, so do you now see Do you now feel or sense a difference when you are sitting down to write a poem or write a song, or is there still kind of that overlap that sometimes you write poetry that turns into a song?
I mean, there's always overlap. I think when I try to journal or write away from a guitar, I'll end up stealing from myself. Whether or not I sat down to write a song, or I was just trying to sort of clear my mind, I'll have phrases that I end up wanting to throw into a song here or there. And then other times too, you know, there will be some sort of melody or chord progression that I find myself playing over and over again, and I want to save it because I don't have anything lyrically for it yet. And
Right.
so yeah, I just find myself like sort of keeping notebooks or voice memos of things, and then sometimes, you know, it's really sweet when it just happens that you sit down and the two come at the same time.
Right.
But that it is it's, I guess that's more rare for me, that kind.
Okay. Now let's backtrack a little bit. How do you feel that your experiences hanging out in bars and with older people as a young person, do you feel that shaped you in any specific way? It made you maybe wise beyond your years, or cynical, or have some kind of effect on you as an artist, perhaps, or maybe as a person?
Yeah, I mean, I guess because I was sort of surrounded by older folks from a younger age, and especially this time I've spent in bars, you know, whereas I mean, I definitely have had my fun, you know. I mean, I've had some fun in my life, although I haven't led some like tragic life. I pick up on that sort of stuff, and
Right.
I think I've you know, had the chance of meeting many a character in my still short life, but so far, but I you know, I definitely was picking up on these like sort of darker vibes, I guess, a little earlier on than some people. You know,
And
I
that's
guess
possibly fodder for the writer.
yeah. You know, it's funny. My folks had a friend who have a friend who is a musician and has a studio in town, and we do very different things. But you know, they were just like, well, you know, you should hang out with him because, you know, he could maybe give you some advice or whatever. And so I went over to this guy's house, and a lovely dude, good friend of mine. I played him like a couple of the first songs I'd ever written, and this is when I was like 16 or so.
Okay.
And on my way back to my parents' house, which is where I was living, I was still in high school, my mom called me and she said, hey, we just got off the phone with Terry, and he's a little worried about you. He was like, he thinks you might be depressed.
Oh, brother.
And I was like, but you know, I have a really great, and I always have really a great relationship with my folks, and I think they've always known that I'm all right, and they know
Yes.
where that stuff comes from, and the cool thing is that they've always been incredibly supportive, whether or not I'm singing about, you know, whatever sad destructive thing I'm singing about. They know that it's coming from a place of me trying to figure everything out. So
Yes.
it's been cool to have. It's really, really special that I have that sort of support in my life, and that also they are able to stay out of my way enough, you know, even when I have been self-destructive, you know. And I think that that's an incredible gift that not many kids have growing up, you know, is having folks who care deeply about them and want to support them and can also stay out of the way and let them make their own mistakes.
Yes. As a parent of a young singer-songwriter myself, that is a lesson that has to be learned as a parent, and it is not easy. But
yeah, I can't imagine.
So let's talk about you touched on this earlier. I want to ask how important the Texas kind of songwriting tradition is to your approach to your craft. So you mentioned Guy Clark, Townes Van Zandt, you know, Lucinda Williams, Rodney Crowell. Have you studied these songwriters? Do you try and follow what they do, or have you just kind of, through exposure to their work, do you think it has influenced you?
Oh man, I mean, all of the above, but
Yeah.
the thing about like Guy and Townes is that they really are great storytellers, as well as being poets. And I guess not that those two things are necessarily different, but when I think about, the lyrical style of some of Townes' songs that I find more open-ended, as opposed to some of the songs that are just like really telling a linear story.
Right.
I think I'm definitely drawn to the stuff that's a little bit more open-ended, a little bit more open to interpretation. Maybe it's just I'm not that good at telling stories, but I really do like that sort of writing style. So I think in a way, I do feel though that like the Texas tradition is kind of a little bit more storytelling, and I'm not sure that I've ever really found my voice there, and maybe that's just not an interest of mine, is to write like that. But the stuff like the one-liner stuff that's in their songs, where it could even be inside of a story song, the
turn of a phrase.
Yeah, the turn of a phrase, or sort of painting a scene rather than like telling the story.
Right.
That's definitely something I try to like hold myself to when I write.
Well, I'm going to bring up a particular song of yours if I can, because it kind of put me in the mind of a Guy Clark song, "Good Luck Man."
Yeah.
The lyrics to that really, of all your songs, really to me struck me as closest to poetry. I think it really stands on its own, lyrically, structurally, and it kind of reminded me of Guy Clark because of the structure. You had 5-line verses or stanzas, whatever you want to call them, and the last line of each was different, yet they call back to the last lines of the other verses. They kind of reflect on each other.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about the writing of that song, and maybe if you were thinking about that kind of structure when you wrote it?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because I was actually, on 2 accounts. I was just in Nashville a couple days ago for about a week, and there's a song, Magnolia Wind, that I believe was a co-write, but Guy Clark did it, and it was a co-write, and I just went and saw this guy, the other writer of that song, recently, because I heard that he wrote that song with Guy.
Okay.
But this specific tune, Magnolia Wind, was one that I was listening to when I wrote Good Luck Man, and when I find songs that I like or that really speak to me, I just like, whether or not I like it or not, but I will like sit there and listen to a song on repeat, and like people think I'm crazy, but I will do that, and that's what I was doing with that Guy Clark song, and
so
wait,
I
that's
was
when
not, I was in the ballpark then.
You totally, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, just right on the nose, and so that was a song I was going through. I was losing my mind a little bit, and I was sitting on the couch at my old house on East 50th Street in Austin, and I had so much going on in my heart and in my head, and I was like, I know I have so much to work with here. Like, just come out of me. Come on, I'm ready. Like, pen in hand, and I sat on the couch for all day long, and I was just like beating my head against the table. Like, where is it? Come on. And I finally gave up, and I just like turned the lamp off and went to fall asleep on the couch. And so I put my head down on the pillow, or armrest or whatever, the couch. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I sat right up. I turned the lamp back on, and I wrote the first line of that song.
Uh-huh.
And I turned the light off, and I went to sleep. And the next morning, I woke up, and I wrote the whole thing.
Wow.
And that's that's the closest thing I think I've ever gotten to, like, that one just came kind of,
Yes.
Well, after like beating myself over the head for a day, but
Closest, you were about to say, closer you come to feeling like the song just came to you.
yeah.
After 5 hours of nothing.
Well, at least 5, but it's also that I was, like I said, I was just in Nashville, and I have a good friend, Chris, who was a guitar tech on Leonard Cohen's last tour before he passed away, and he was he gave that record to Leonard, and I mean, this was all just a story that was told to me,
Okay.
But Chris said that Leonard said he listened to it and he really liked that song specifically, which is like, I don't know, who knows if that's true. I'd like to believe it's true, but
I'd
yeah,
like to
that
think
kind
that I'd
of
like to
blows
think
me
that
away.
Leonard Cohen and I have something in common now.
Right. Anyway, so that's pretty cool.
That's great.
The forgiveness is a funny word we use and we lie in. We give ourselves a heavy dose, all just to keep from crying. Can't you see? Oh, can't you see that it's blinding?
You kind of hit on something there when you were talking about lying on the couch for 5 hours. You've been writing songs for a long time. Are there things habits you've developed now or tricks you have to try and coax the muse out of you? Are there any tricks you have when it's not working?
No, I'm really bad at it.
Okay.
But I do find that, like, I'm definitely in a dry spell as far as like finishing anything right now. And I think a lot of it is just because I've been out of shape. Like, I'm not writing as often as I had been the past couple of years.
Okay.
Whether it be sitting down to finish a song or just writing in general, journaling or anything like that. And I've been on the road a bunch, and so finding the time and space is hard. But it's like, one thing I've found is that I realize now, like, if you don't write all the time, you will absolutely be out of shape. And especially like right now, I think that my musical interests are sort of shifting.
Right.
And so like, I'm like, oh, I would love to write a song like this or a song like that, or, you know, and so, but my writing ability, because I've had this dry spell, hasn't really caught up with where my interests are. So I'm like still trying to navigate that. And I find that I'll like hold myself to some sort of standard where I'm like, well, this isn't as different from what I used to be doing, so it's not good, you know, and then I won't pursue it. And it's that will kill you, you know, you just have to do it.
The self-censor.
Yeah.
The critic.
And so, you know, I think who was it that, I don't remember who said this, but, you know, to be a fearless artist or a careless artist and, like a rabid editor or something like that, you know, so just get it out of you. And one thing I will say, and this doesn't necessarily pertain only to songwriting, when I'm on the road, I'm like, oh, I really need to be writing and journaling. But it can be really hard to like sit down. But first of all, finding the time to do that is hard. But then, like, you know, it feels strange to sort of just like tell yourself about how the tour is going. And you're like, well, I smell bad, and like I drank too much, and like everybody in the band's pissed off today because whatever. And
yes,
and so
you don't see the benefit of that in the moment you're doing it.
Well, and you don't see the beautiful little things that happen during your day necessarily, and it's hard to sit down and write to yourself like that. And so what I've found is that writing postcards has been really, really great, because I mean, even just writing someone's address down, it gives you so much purpose. And then I'll find that I will sit down and write, you know, 4 or 5 postcards, and I will inevitably have little phrases that I end up being like, man, yeah, and I'll go copy it down in my notebook or something, and just like,
wow,
you'll notice things about your day that you know you'll overhear, or you'll just, you know, sitting in a coffee shop or something, and you just watching somebody, and it's like you'll find a cool way to say something about that, And
So setting yourself up the pressure of having to write something interesting to someone else makes you maybe a little more attentive.
or even I just like maybe just have a little bit more compassion for it. Like you
Okay.
can, it's like it's hard to find the time to do something for yourself, even though it's going to be good for yourself or good for you.
So now when you go on the road, do you pack like 200 postcards with stamps on them?
Yeah, I carry around stamps in my wallet, and I stop at gas stations or coffee shops. They'll have them.
Yep.
And
That's
it's funny. I'll sit down to journal or try to write something, and it's like I can't get anything out, and then inevitably I'll sit down and write a postcard, and there's never enough room. I'll always want to write more, and it's like that's all I needed to like get this thing rolling.
That's great. I think you could be onto something there. Let's talk about your live music experience a little bit. You talked about going to see shows when you were younger. Are there any particular performers or style of performing that you took in as a fan that you think have influenced you as a performer, or maybe more interestingly as a writer?
I've been given some really cool opportunities in my still, like I'm still very early on and trying to have a career in this sort of deal, but I've been given some cool opportunities to open for some bigger acts. Shaky Graves,
Right.
Gary Clark Jr., for example. Just like having a sense of like what goes into a show has been really cool, watching these bigger artists play and then having them then invite me to be a part of their shows. I also, so like the flow.
So in terms of that, playing before someone else's audience versus playing for people who came to see you,
Yeah,
that's a completely different thing, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's also like it's a great amount of pressure. It's also like this really great challenge, to try and win an audience over. And sometimes that is done by having a great rowdy set where one song leads into the next with no stopping. And some of it has to do with really using space and silence to your advantage and not being insecure about taking time.
So you've been performing live, since you were 16, right?
Yeah.
A lot, ever since then.
Yeah. Quite a bit.
So do you feel that live performance is a big part of what you are as a songwriter? So in other words, you playing your songs live is what is important about the songs, about writing the songs?
I think I get a lot out of that. Yeah. I think I do enjoy performing. I've also, been really uncomfortable on stage before and had, some sort of stage fright or anxiety, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's funny that stuff sort of comes at the weirdest times when you least expect it. And I know people deal with it on various degrees or, on various levels.
Right.
To various degrees. But I really do, like, I get so much out of a live performance, whether it's good or bad. It will just like either like make or break me in an evening or whatever. But it's really important. I don't know if I could just write songs and not ever play. I enjoy it. I really do enjoy performing.
How would you define, in your terms, what a good live performance is for you?
Well, I have definitely been to see shows that were like incredible, whatever's going on stage, whether it be like incredible singing or incredible playing, and not felt like I was a part of it at all.
Right.
Which is, like not, that's okay. But the shows I like to go see are ones where the performer and the performance itself is a little bit more human, But I think the shows that I've been most moved by have been shows where I felt like the performance let me in a little bit,
Yes. So so as a performer, you're trying to make that connection with the audience.
Yeah, and sometimes you go way too far and you end up like totally just making a fool of yourself, and you're like, oh shit, they know I'm a loser now. But then there's this like endearing quality of just like letting people. I mean, I even noticed that like when I was waiting tables, like if you like, I don't know, there's art to just walking around and being a human being, it's
Yes.
like, and that's the stuff that really kind of moves me. That is universal. I think, not everybody's going to be a prodigy or this like incredible singer, but there's something, when there's something human about the performance, wherever that comes out,
Right.
That's really powerful.
So let's talk about the new album,
Yeah.
Carousel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you worked with Mike McCarthy as producer on this. He worked most famously, in my opinion, with Spoon.
Mm-hmm.
He produced the album Ga Ga Ga, which is a favorite of mine. I think that's some of the most well-crafted studio pop music of the last 20 years. And now you recorded your previous album live in the studio, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before. And so this seems to me quite a change for you to go in the studio with someone like Mike. How did you feel about that?
Well, we did all the stuff with Mike live too. It was.
You did? Okay.
I mean, pretty much. There was Sam who plays steel. He was like deathly ill when we went to cut the record, so he had to overdub steel. I did some dubs on vocals. The violin on Dram Shop was overdubbed, but for the most part, the electric guitar, acoustic guitar, bass, drums, and actually most of the vocals were all done all live within 2 days.
Oh wow!
But the thing about working with I'd never worked with a producer before, so I was really excited to like, especially because I was re-recording songs, to kind of like just see like where we could take stuff, like how,
right.
What can we do with this? Like, how far can we push this? And Mike was really cool because I think even when songs would change and I would like get excited about where they were going musically, Mike would be like, I don't think you need to change what you're doing vocally. Like, just perform. Like, just sing the song. And
right.
like the stuff that's happening underneath you, like, just let it take it somewhere else. But this is where you can really shine. And I don't think you need to take it anywhere else necessarily, which was really cool because then I really focused on my performance. And but yeah, Mike just sort of, he created this environment where we could just sort of take chances and like, but it was all really natural,
Let me interrupt you for a second because you hit on something I was going to get to later when you talked about the way he told you to just sing. I have the impression from listening to the record that the productions, there's different instrumentation, there's different sounds on the different songs, but it seems as though the presentation is to emphasize the songs lyrically.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's, that's really cool to work with somebody who cares about what you have to say, Mike really likes the songs, and that was like when we were talking about which songs we wanted to record, Mike was like, these are important and you need to give them another shot at being heard.
Yeah, let's talk about that. One of the things I always find interesting to talk with songwriters about is there a time at which you think a song you have written is finished, or is it more of a living thing that you can revisit later and have a new outlook on, or even maybe change the song somewhat because you've changed as a writer? So this is an interesting question for you because several of the songs on this record are songs you previously recorded. Mm-hmm. So can you talk more about that decision to revisit those songs?
Yeah, definitely. I do think that they're sort of like living and breathing parts of us. I haven't changed any of my lyrics, but definitely like the meanings behind some things have have morphed a little bit, or at least they've taken on other meanings now too.
Right.
And so I think they get sung with different intent sometimes, which is cool. When we decided to do this record and kind of give it like a bigger release, you know, and sort of have this be a little bit more of like my introduction to like the big wide professional music world.
Right.
Which was just important for me to do as somebody who grew up in Austin, which is like this amazing little town, but can kind of feel like the entire world when you haven't been outside of it because it has so much going on. It was really important for me to revisit some of this stuff with a little bit more outside perspective and having a literal outside perspective with working with a producer. And getting to sort of try things out and push myself in certain ways. And also then to like, you know, we did this record at this studio, Quad Studios on Music Row, and it was just like, I had never been in like a real studio, which was cool, you know, and you don't have to do that. Obviously now you can make an entire record on your phone. And there's no problem doing that. I just hadn't had that experience, and it was something that I really wanted to try. And I think too, going outside of my element a little bit was really healthy for me. Especially
even geographically.
Yeah. I mean, definitely geographically. Yeah. And also, so Mike and I talked about, you know, if I was to make this record with, you know, the way we did it, which was going to Nashville, and I used players that were all handpicked by Mike, except for Sam, who played steel. And, you know, so other than Sam, I hadn't played with any of these people before. And that was like really incredible to just walk into a room and like play the song on acoustic guitar and be like, here are the things that I think are important about the arrangement. Here's something that I'd like to accent here, blah, blah, blah. And then just like see what happened. And it opened up so many doors. It's just really healthy to like change things up every now and then. Well, so anyways, besides that, treating it as sort of kind of like a different sort of debut record, and giving it a real release, that's when we sat down and decided, okay, so because I have a bunch of songs now, you know, because it's been a couple years since I put out that Good Luck Man record. And Mike was like, you know, Mike and I chose these songs to be sort of like, okay, this is who Carson McHone is, introducing Carson McHone to the rest of the world. And it was really important that those early songs be on there.
Okay, so let's talk about one in particular. So let's talk about the song "Lucky." Mm-hmm. Now, some of your older songs they employ like sarcasm or irony to talk about difficult relationships. "Lucky" uses kind of different tempos, right, to call out the sadness and strength of the narrator. Kind of bounces back and forth.
Yeah.
And in fact, at the end, she's holding the hot branding iron, which is kind of a strong, obviously, symbol. Yeah. The version on the new record seems less like playful. The emotions seem to be more on display and not hidden behind the more traditional musical approach to the old one. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was actually just talking with a buddy of mine the other day about that song. Like the space in the verses, the use of space is like, it brings much more focus to the vocal and what's going on there. And it's just like sort of, it's allowing more to be going on with the lyrics, you know. There's more space. I don't know how to talk, but it's like, when it jumps to that faster tempo, it's a little less like immediately honky-tonk, you know. There's definitely fiddle and steel on it, which are like traditionally like country instruments, but like the weird kind of like plucky guitar thing that's going on, and you're just like, what's going on there? So it really kind of like lets the vocal lead, and it's not just saying like, here's this honky-tonk song, you know,
right,
about somebody cheating on you or whatever. And I hope that comes across, and there's a little bit more room for interpretation, and like literally there is more space in the verses. Like the guitar is like really open.
Yes, that is definitely the impression I got.
You got sweethearts all over this town, and each thinks you're a good-hearted man. your secret I share, although you're not aware, and I'll keep it as long as I can. Ain't you lucky? Oh, ain't you lucky? Lucky that I love being lonely. Ain't it swell? Oh, ain't it swell? Swell that I don't ever cry. Ain't it sweet? Oh, that I buy all your cruel lies. Ain't you lucky? Oh, ain't you lucky, babe? Lucky that I love being lonely.
Let's talk about the song Drugs. When I saw you perform this live, it was a somewhat older crowd than maybe your usual crowd. You kind of introed it by emphasizing the use of metaphor in the song.
Yeah.
The song is called Drugs. Obviously a metaphor, but a pretty direct and dramatic metaphor. Can you talk about this song and how this one came about?
Sure. This song is actually the only song on the record that was co-written, and it was a song that was written by a guy named Chris Brecht, who's a good buddy of mine. And I heard Chris play this song because we played a festival together in Germany, and that refrain over and over, "I need drugs, I need drugs, I need drugs," it just driven home, and I was like, man, that's so great. I love it, and it just drives it home. But the verses were, I thought about, I wanted to play it, but the verses were really, I couldn't find things that, I felt really close to in the verses.
Okay.
And there were some lyrics that I just couldn't, I was like, they were great, but it was just not, I couldn't sing it and feel like it was speaking about me personally. So I did this crazy thing where I asked Chris if I could rewrite his song, and he let me do it, which is really incredible. And I mean, also that being said, the structure and the rhyme scheme is all Chris, which was really cool because I was able to start out with this song that had it already had form, and so it held me a little bit to this structure. And almost because it started out being somebody else's tune, I didn't have to hold myself to some story that I was telling about my life in a way. Well, that's not how it happened, so I have to say all of this. I have to tell this story. I was able to pick and choose where to insert myself. So it really kind of became just this huge play on words, which was more of a really fun exercise. And I think it's definitely there's some strong emotion that comes out in the song, but it's I was able to have a lot of fun with it, play with it a lot. So I ended up rewriting, a handful of the lyrics, and really changing the meaning of the song. I think before it was a song about doing drugs. And
it was actually about doing drugs.
Yeah, and it's still about abuse and
addiction,
use. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a little bit more. I mean, it just speaks to me a little bit more. I mean, it can be about whatever the hell you want it to be about.
That's right.
But yeah, so that's where that song came from, and the Velvet Underground had that song Heroin, and
yes,
that was a huge influence on just the intro and outro of that song, just those two chords bouncing back and forth, and just this sort of incessant rhythm and repetition.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's about drugs. It's not about drugs. It's whatever you want,
If I said you tasted sweet, would you let me use you terribly, so terribly sweet? Oh, let me feed, we'll feed each other. This kind of kindness kills, not sleep hungry. I need drugs, 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 I need your drugs.
Okay, let's talk about the song Sad. Again, to me, a more direct lyrical approach than you've taken in the past. I mean, not only writing about difficult feelings, you're kind of personifying them, right? You're addressing the sadness.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that song a little bit?
Yeah, we just released that song as the first single from the record for people to hear, and I guess like with the premiere, I gave them like a quote about the song, and it's really like somebody was like mad at me and said, you know, I don't know what your problem is. You're just like, oh man, you know, you write sad songs to make yourself miserable, and like you just like wallow in it, and it was like that was like really offensive to me.
Right.
And I was like, so this song is sort of like addressing that, and then also like being able to own the fact that like I do have this, like, some people deal with depression, some people deal with this or that, some people just are like empathetic when they see something that's sad.
Yes.
Sorry. But like, and that can manifest, that sadness or that melancholy can manifest itself in different ways, and I think it can make you do really terrible things. It can make you be an asshole. It can make you do whatever, you know. And if you don't address it, or if you don't like pay attention to it, you're really cheating yourself, you know. You're really lying to yourself. So that song definitely has some attitude, but it also like, you know, it's trying not to take itself too seriously, and also it's trying to do all of those things in one song. It's an empowering song to sing about being sad.
Yes.
You know? And it's like, what are you going to do with it? Because it's there.
Well, here's the deal. I got this thing, I call it sad, and it calls me home. And I hold this sadness inside of me, and it's here to stay. Oh, but I wish it'd leave. Sometimes I stay way down low, and I forget that I'm not alone. But then she comes out late at night and makes me do things I don't like.
All right, I'm going to change tracks a little bit. I believe I have this right, that you're a horse person, right?
Yes.
You kind of grew up with horses. You give riding lessons. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
So horses are still a part of your life.
Yep. Yeah, I drove in yesterday and taught a riding lesson after driving back from Little Rock.
Do you think that spending time with horses impacts your creative process or your musicianship in any way? Or do you see parallels between your time with horses and your musical life?
Definitely. I mean, I think that when the cool thing about being around horses is that you have to be really honest with yourself. You can't bullshit a horse. If you try to, you'll get hurt. I mean, you can get hurt not bullshitting a horse too. It's very easy.
They can tell, you're saying.
Yeah. Or you'll just get yourself into a bad situation, and you got to really trust yourself, and you got to be really honest. I think those are great things to practice in whatever you do for a living or fun or anything like that. But I think definitely it's healthy to do if you're trying to like tell the deeper truths in the world or whatever. You know, it's like if you're trying to access those really, really strong, deep, universal human emotions, you know, you got to take that you got to take yourself seriously. You got to take your situation seriously.
Mm-hmm. Is this what you tell people that you're teaching riding to? Some of these things?
Yeah, absolutely. it's a pretty powerful thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like really, really strange that we ride horses because it's like not natural. It's like having a predator just jump on a prey animal's back and like ride around is really weird.
So there has to be a process involved.
Yeah, there's a process, and it's a fine balance. It's a balancing act, and I guess literally and figuratively.
Kind of like performing.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like dangerous. It's not
Right.
it's not like if somebody's dog is misbehaving and they like jump up on you, it's like that's obnoxious. But like if a horse makes a wrong move or even slips or something, something happens, like you can be broken in like
Yep.
an instant. So there's this heightened, I don't know, it's exciting,
Yeah.
and it can be really unnerving for people. I mean, I grew up around horses, so I'm kind of like, I have this other sense, like when I walk around, I'm like always looking at the ground, just like seeing if there's anything a horse could step on, or like, oh, that would be dangerous. I have this sort
Yes.
of other sense about me, but other people, are really, really scared of horses and how big they are, and for good reason. And it's really, really powerful to watch somebody be able to work with a horse who's incredibly intimidated by them, and then also address like what's going on inside of them too.
Well,
And,
I have a confession to make. I am not comfortable around horses.
well, you're gonna have to come to Texas, and we'll get you on a horse.
But I think one thing you're going to be doing is hitting the road a lot for the new record. Right?
Definitely. Which is why writing postcards and holding myself to this practice is really good. But
you have my address. I'll accept postcards.
Okay, great.
Let me ask you one more question that I kind of ask everyone. It's kind of a big picture thing. When you think about what you're trying to do as an artist, writer, performer, is there maybe something you're shooting for, like a holy grail, a type of song you want to write, an experience you want to give, or something, a body of work you're trying to create? Is there some kind of guiding principle maybe you're shooting for, whether it's achievable or not, whether it's, like I would ultimately like to create something that...
It's really important that I, especially as a performer and not just a writer, like that I am able to connect on some sort of universal level. When people respond to my music, that's incredible. I don't know. I think we're all striving to just feel comfortable in our own skin, and like, I think with each new song, it's like, oh my God, I think I'm that much closer. Like I really hear myself in that, or I really feel like myself when I play that song. And some are truer than others. Not that there's anything dishonest about the ones that don't feel that close, but I think we're all just kind of not whatever. I'm speaking for myself, but as an artist, like to feel totally comfortable in, which I don't know if that will ever happen, but to feel comfortable in your own skin and in what you're saying, and feel like maybe it could be doing other people good.
Great.
I don't know if I really answered your question, but I think I said something good.
You said a few things that were good. All right. Well, we can leave it there. I really appreciate your taking the time.
Of course.
To talk with us, and we're very excited about the new record. I think it's great.
Cheers. Thank you very much. I
right,
can't wait to come back.
All right.
How about being young? Or how about being old? How about wanting something warm, just to hold you when you're cold? How about take me in your arms tonight and feel the way I fold? We're choosing teams to play the game, but as fate would have it, they forgot my name. So now I'm barefoot on the blacktop, but it smells like it might rain. Tell me, friend, have you ever felt this way upon the hour?
Thanks for listening to this episode of Tell You What, the podcast. I really enjoyed my talk with Carson, and I look forward to catching her show on a current tour. You can find tour date info at carsonmchahonemusic.com. So get on out, take in a show, give the great new album Carousel some spins, ride some horses, send some postcards, spread the word. Please check out our other episodes of our podcast at tellyouwhatpodcast.com or on the Apple and Google podcast places. More great guests are ahead, so watch this space. Until next time, remember, music is the best.
How about take me in your arms tonight and feel the way I fall?